take a deep breath and pause whatever you're doing right now. What I'm about to share with you has been concealed from humanity for over 5,000 years. Imagine discovering ancient Sanskrit texts so profound that those who truly understand them claim they can precisely map the journey of consciousness after death. Not just describe it, but provide exact instructions for navigating it. This isn't speculation. This isn't religion. This is a detailed blueprint of what happens in the exact moment your final breath leaves your body. Despite all our technological advances, despite all our scientific breakthroughs, we still haven't answered humanity's most burning question: what truly happens when we die? But what if I told you that ancient Indian sages had already solved this mystery millennia ago? They left behind texts so extraordinary, so illuminating that for centuries they were only transmitted from guru to disciple with the utmost secrecy. Why? Because these aren't just books about death. They're precise manuals for navigating the journey between this existence and whatever comes next, a space they called the Antarabhava. Here's what's truly extraordinary. Modern neuroscience is now finding remarkable similarities between what these ancient texts describe and what people report during near-death experiences. The same patterns, the same stages, the same transformative visions. And here's the most astonishing part. These texts claim that the moment of death isn't the end of consciousness. Instead, it's potentially the most powerful opportunity for liberation we'll ever encounter. But there's a serious caveat, and it's significant. If you're not prepared for what you'll experience in those crucial moments, you risk becoming trapped in cycles of confusion that could persist through many lifetimes. Today, you're going to learn exactly what these ancient masters discovered. You'll understand why some of the world's leading scientists and consciousness researchers are now studying these texts, and most importantly, you'll learn what really happens in those pivotal moments after your final heartbeat. I must warn you, though, once you understand these truths, you'll never view life or death the same way again. Are you ready to uncover what might be humanity's greatest hidden knowledge? The texts we're discussing are known collectively as the Vedantic Death Scriptures, but that name barely scratches the surface of what they truly are. Because these aren't just texts about dying, they're detailed instructions for the most significant journey your consciousness will ever undertake. And in the next few minutes, you're going to learn exactly why this ancient wisdom could transform everything we thought we knew about the nature of human consciousness itself. But first, we need to understand how these mysterious teachings survived thousands of years of upheaval to finally reach the modern world. Because their journey from the sacred groves and hidden ashrams of ancient India to the laboratories of modern consciousness researchers is almost as extraordinary as their contents. Picture yourself in a modern hospital's intensive care unit. The rhythmic beep of heart monitors fills the air. A patient's heart suddenly stops, clinically dead. But minutes later, they return to life with an extraordinary story, one that matches with stunning precision texts written thousands of years before modern medicine existed. This isn't just happening occasionally. Thousands of documented near-death experiences across different cultures, religions, and continents tell remarkably similar stories that mirror exactly what the Vedantic Death Scriptures described millennia ago. Let me share something that might astonish you. In 2019, researchers at New York University's Langone School of Medicine completed a groundbreaking study of consciousness during cardiac arrest. What they found sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Their research revealed that awareness doesn't immediately end when the heart stops beating. Instead, many patients reported vivid experiences of consciousness while clinically dead, experiences that follow patterns described in these ancient Indian texts with uncanny precision. Many survivors reported floating above their bodies, watching medical staff work on them, and later could accurately describe events that occurred during their resuscitation, events they couldn't possibly have witnessed through normal means. But how is this possible when their brains showed no measurable activity? This is where the ancient wisdom of the Vedantic Death Scriptures becomes impossible to ignore, because they tell us something revolutionary. Consciousness doesn't end when the brain stops functioning. Instead, it enters what the ancient sages called bhava-avastha, a state of pure awareness beyond physical existence. Think about this for a moment. Modern neuroscience is discovering that consciousness might not be produced by the brain at all. What if the brain is more like a receiver, picking up consciousness the way a television picks up broadcast signals? This would explain why people can remain aware even when their brain shows no activity. Dr. Sam Parnia, who has spent decades studying what happens to consciousness when we die, suggests that people can remain conscious for minutes or even hours after clinical death. But here's the fascinating part. Their experiences often follow the exact stages described in the Vedantic Death Scriptures. Now you might be thinking, this sounds incredible, but what does it mean for me? The implications are profound. If consciousness continues after death, if we remain aware during this transition, then how we prepare for this moment becomes crucial. It's like preparing for the most important journey you'll ever take. But this is just the beginning of what modern science is discovering. The Vedantic Death Scriptures don't just tell us that consciousness continues, they map out exactly what happens next. They describe a sequence of experiences so precise, so detailed, that they're revolutionizing our understanding of what it means to be conscious. And this brings us to perhaps the most extraordinary discovery of all. Scientists studying altered states of consciousness have found something remarkable. The experiences reported by participants in these studies match with uncanny accuracy the stages of consciousness described in these ancient manuscripts. But to understand why this is so significant, we need to go back to where this knowledge first emerged. Picture yourself in the lush forests of northern India over 5,000 years ago. A gathering of rishis, master meditators, have discovered something that will change our understanding of death forever. But the story of how this knowledge was preserved and transmitted through the centuries is almost as extraordinary as the knowledge itself. In the verdant valleys along the sacred Ganges, where the air is thick with humidity and alive with the sounds of nature, an extraordinary tradition began to unfold. At a time when much of the world was still developing written language, enlightened sages were exploring the deepest mysteries of consciousness through rigorous meditation practices. What they discovered about death would remain hidden from the wider world for millennia. These weren't ordinary meditators. These were rishis, seers who had dedicated decades to the systematic exploration of consciousness itself. Through disciplined practice, they developed the ability to maintain awareness through states that most humans experience only unconsciously. The transition from wakefulness to sleep, from sleep to dreaming, and most importantly, the transition we call death. But here's something most people don't know. The Vedantic Death Scriptures weren't originally written texts at all. For centuries, these teachings were transmitted orally, from teacher to student, using complex mnemonic techniques to ensure not a single syllable was lost or altered. The information was considered too sacred, too powerful, to be written down where it might be misunderstood or misused. Think about this for a moment. These teachings were preserved through an unbroken lineage of masters and disciples, using the human mind itself as the most sophisticated preservation system ever devised. They used techniques like circular breathing, precise tonal recitation, and specialized memory training to ensure these teachings remained intact. The texts themselves were encoded in Sanskrit, a language so mathematically precise that it preserved meaning across millennia without distortion. The techniques described for navigating death weren't concepts to be intellectually understood. They were experiential realities to be directly perceived through disciplined practice. Now fast forward to the late Vedic period. As societal upheavals threatened this oral tradition, realized masters finally committed these teachings to written form in what would become known as the Upanishads, particularly sections like the Katha Upanishad and portions of the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad that deal specifically with the death process. What makes these texts so extraordinary isn't just their age or method of preservation. It's the fact that they address the one experience every single human being will face: death, with a level of precision and detail that still astonishes researchers today. When these texts finally reached the West in the 19th century, they caught the attention of quantum physicists like Erwin Schrödinger and later consciousness researchers who recognized them not as religious texts, but as sophisticated maps of consciousness itself. But here's what makes this even more relevant to you. The Vedantic Death Scriptures aren't just about what happens after we die. They're manuals for understanding the nature of mind itself. Every teaching they contain can be applied to the challenges and transitions we face in our daily lives. And this brings us to the most crucial part of the story. The texts describe something that modern science is only beginning to understand: the existence of different levels of consciousness, each one more subtle than the last. These aren't just theoretical concepts. They're experiential realities that every human being encounters, whether they're aware of it or not. As we delve deeper into these teachings, you're about to discover what happens in that crucial moment when consciousness begins to separate from the body. The Vedantic Death Scriptures describe this process in such precise detail that even modern hospice workers are now studying their wisdom to better understand what their patients experience. But before we explore these stages, you need to understand something crucial. What you're about to learn isn't just ancient theory. It's a practical guide for the most important journey your consciousness will ever take. And it begins with something the ancient sages called Brahma-prakasha, a phenomenon so profound that recognizing it could mean the difference between liberation and continued cycles of existence. Imagine this. In the final moment of your life, as your last breath leaves your body, something extraordinary happens. Instead of darkness, you experience a light so brilliant, so all-encompassing, that it defies description. This isn't just any light. It's what the ancient texts call Brahma-prakasha, the primordial light of pure awareness, the most profound moment any human being can experience. In this pivotal instant, as your heart takes its final beat, the Vedantic Death Scriptures describe something revolutionary. Your consciousness doesn't diminish. It expands. Every limitation falls away. Every boundary dissolves. You're faced with the ultimate nature of reality itself, pure and unfiltered. Think about this. Your entire life, your consciousness, has been like a lamp illuminating your experiences. But in this moment, it becomes like the sun itself, boundless, brilliant, all-encompassing. This is why the ancient texts say this moment contains the greatest opportunity for liberation any being can encounter. Modern neuroscience is discovering something fascinating about this experience. When studying the brains of dying patients, researchers have detected a surge of electrical activity in the moment of death. A final burst of consciousness more intense than anything experienced in normal waking life. Could this be what the ancient Indian sages were describing thousands of years ago? But here's where things become crucial. The Vedantic Death Scriptures warn that this moment is as fleeting as it is powerful. Like a flash of lightning in the night sky, it illuminates everything for an instant. And in that instant, you have a choice, though most aren't prepared to recognize it as such. Why aren't we prepared? Because we've spent our entire lives identifying with our thoughts, our emotions, our personal story. But in this moment, all of that falls away. You're faced with consciousness in its pure form. Imagine trying to recognize your own face if you'd never seen a mirror. That's the challenge this moment presents. This is why these ancient texts aren't just guides for the dying, they're manuals for living. Because this same primordial light, this same pure awareness, is present in every moment of your life. It's just usually hidden behind the constant stream of thoughts, emotions, and sensory experiences that make up our daily existence. The text describes specific practices, techniques for recognizing this light in life. Every time you meditate, every moment of pure awareness, every experience of profound clarity, these are like rehearsals for the ultimate moment. This is why long-time meditators often report experiencing this light in deep practice, catching glimpses of what awaits all of us. But what happens if you miss this opportunity? What if the primordial light is too overwhelming, too unfamiliar to recognize? This is where the journey through the intermediate states truly begins, because what comes next is even more extraordinary, a sequence of experiences so profound that they've been kept secret for millennia. As the primordial light fades, if you haven't recognized it, your consciousness enters what's called the swapna-avastha, a realm where the contents of your own mind begin to take form around you. Imagine every thought, every emotion, every deep-seated tendency manifesting as vivid, living experiences. This is where the real challenges begin. But before we explore these remarkable visions, you need to understand something crucial about their nature. Because what the Vedantic Death Scriptures reveal about these experiences isn't just a description of what happens after death. It's a profound insight into the very nature of reality itself. And what you're about to learn might completely transform how you understand your own consciousness. Imagine standing in the most vivid dream you've ever experienced. The primordial light has faded, and now reality itself begins to transform around you. You're entering what the ancient texts call the swapna-avastha, a realm where the deepest contents of your consciousness take form. But what happens next challenges everything we think we know about the nature of reality and mind. In this extraordinary state, you encounter something unprecedented. Brilliant figures of light, divine beings radiating peace and wisdom. These aren't just vague visions. The texts describe them with incredible precision. Radiant deities emanating colored lights, each representing a different aspect of enlightened awareness. But here's the revolutionary truth. These beings aren't external gods or angels. They're manifestations of your own enlightened nature. Think about this. Every quality of enlightenment, wisdom, compassion, clarity, effectiveness, spaciousness, exists within you right now. In the swapna-avastha, these qualities appear as radiant beings of light. It's as if your highest potential takes form before your eyes, offering a chance for recognition and liberation. This is where Western psychology's insights become fascinating. Pioneering psychologists saw these peaceful deities as archetypes, universal patterns in the human psyche. When you encounter the deity of boundless light, you're meeting your own capacity for limitless awareness. When you see the deity of unshakable ground, you're facing your own inner stability. These aren't just poetic metaphors, they're glimpses of your true nature. But here's where the journey becomes challenging. If you can't recognize these peaceful manifestations as aspects of your own mind, something profound happens. The visions begin to shift. The peaceful deities transform into what the texts call ugra devas, powerful, fierce beings that can seem terrifying at first glance. Now here's what makes these texts so extraordinary. They explain that these wrathful deities are exactly the same enlightened energies as the peaceful ones. They're just appearing in a more dynamic, intense form. Imagine water appearing as both a serene lake and a powerful waterfall. Same essence, different expression. This insight isn't just about after-death experiences. Think about how emotions appear in your daily life. Love can be gentle and nurturing, or it can be fierce and protective. Wisdom can appear as peaceful clarity or as penetrating insight that cuts through delusion. These are the same energies the Vedantic Death Scriptures describe, just on a more profound scale. Modern neuroscience and psychology are finding fascinating parallels to these teachings. Research into non-ordinary states of consciousness shows that when the brain's default mode network quiets down, people often experience similar visions of archetypal beings and profound insights. It's as if these experiences are built into the very structure of human consciousness. The texts offer specific guidance for this stage. Remain calm, recognize everything you see as projections of your own mind, and don't react with attraction or aversion. This isn't just advice for the after-death state, it's profound wisdom for dealing with any challenging experience in life. Every difficult emotion, every challenging situation is an opportunity to recognize its essential nature. But what happens if you can't maintain this recognition? What if the intensity of these experiences becomes overwhelming? This is where the journey takes an even more extraordinary turn, because what comes next reveals something profound about the nature of reality itself and how our consciousness creates the world we experience. As the peaceful and wrathful visions fade, if you haven't recognized their true nature, your consciousness begins to enter even subtler states. The Vedantic Death Scriptures describe what happens next in such precise detail that it leaves no doubt. This isn't just poetry or metaphor. It's a precise map of consciousness itself, revealing stage by stage how our experience of reality manifests. But before we explore these deeper stages, you need to understand something crucial about the nature of mind itself. Because what the texts reveal next isn't just about what happens after death. It's about how your consciousness is creating your reality right now, in this very moment. Imagine floating in a vast ocean of consciousness where every thought, every intention, every unresolved emotion creates ripples that shape your future existence. This is where the ancient texts take us next, into the final and perhaps most crucial stage of the death process, the bhava-avastha, the becoming state. What happens here will determine not just your next life, but the very nature of your future consciousness. The texts describe something extraordinary. At this stage, your consciousness, freed from physical form, experiences reality in its pure potential state. Every thought becomes like a seed instantly sprouting into experience. Every emotion becomes a landscape. Every deep-seated tendency becomes a pathway drawing you toward your next incarnation. Modern quantum physics tells us something remarkable that parallels these ancient insights. At the quantum level, reality exists as pure potential until it's observed. The Vedantic Death Scriptures suggest something similar about consciousness. In this state, your awareness moves through pure potential until your karmic tendencies cause reality to crystallize around you once again. Think about this. Every choice you've ever made, every kindness you've shown, every hurt you've caused, all of these create patterns in your consciousness. These patterns don't disappear when you die. Instead, they become like gravitational forces, drawing you toward experiences that match their frequency. This isn't punishment or reward, it's simply the law of cause and effect operating at the level of consciousness itself. But here's what makes this stage so crucial. Unlike in physical life, where changes happen slowly, in the bhava-avastha, transformation can happen in an instant. A single moment of recognition, a single choice made with clarity, can alter the entire trajectory of your future existence. The stakes couldn't be higher. The text describes specific signs that appear during this phase, signs that indicate which realm of existence you're being drawn toward. But these realms aren't just physical locations, they're states of consciousness. The human realm represents balance and opportunity. The Deva realm represents bliss and pride. The Preta realm represents endless craving and dissatisfaction. Each one reflects a different way that consciousness can manifest. This understanding isn't just relevant after death. Look around you right now. Aren't these same states of consciousness visible in the world? Some people live in a constant state of conflict, others in endless pursuit of pleasure, still others trapped in cycles of addiction and craving. The Vedantic Death Scriptures are showing us that these aren't just metaphors, they're fundamental patterns of consciousness that shape both our lives and our deaths. Here's where this knowledge becomes transformative. You don't have to wait until death to work with these patterns. Every moment of awareness in your current life is an opportunity to reshape these tendencies. Every act of kindness creates patterns of positivity. Every moment of mindfulness strengthens your ability to remain aware during transitions. Every insight into the nature of your mind creates the causes for future liberation. But the text reveals something even more revolutionary. It is possible to break free from these cycles entirely. In the bhava-avastha, if you can maintain complete awareness, if you can see through the illusion of separate existence, liberation is possible. This isn't just spiritual theory, it's a practical possibility that the texts describe in precise detail. As consciousness moves through this state, carrying the imprints of all past actions, a crucial moment approaches. The text describes it as a point of choice, though it's not a choice made with the ordinary thinking mind. It's a choice made by the deepest patterns of your consciousness. And what happens next will determine everything. But before we explore how this final transition occurs, you need to understand something vital about how to prepare for it, because the Vedantic Death Scriptures aren't just describing these stages, they're offering specific practices that you can use right now to prepare for this extraordinary journey. What if I told you that every single day of your life contains miniature versions of the death process? Every time you fall asleep, every time you end a significant chapter in your life, every time you let go of an old identity, these are all small deaths, opportunities to practice for the ultimate transition. This is where these ancient texts transform from an ancient manual into a revolutionary guide for living. Think about how you feel in those moments just before sleep, when your thoughts begin to dissolve and your awareness starts to shift. The ancient masters recognized this daily experience as a precious opportunity to practice for the primordial light of death. Every night, you have the chance to rehearse the most important moment of your existence. Here's a practice you can begin tonight. As you're falling asleep, try to maintain a gentle awareness of the transition. Notice how thoughts become distant, how your sense of body changes, how consciousness itself begins to shift. The texts tell us that this simple practice, done consistently, creates neural pathways that will serve you in the ultimate moment of transition. Modern sleep research has discovered something fascinating that validates this ancient practice. During the transition to sleep, your brain produces the same theta waves observed in deep meditation. When you maintain awareness during this shift, you're literally training your brain to remain conscious during major transitions. This isn't just spiritual theory, it's neuroplasticity in action. But the teachings go even further. Remember those peaceful and wrathful deities we discussed? You're meeting their energies every day. That moment of pure compassion you feel, that's the energy of the peaceful deities. That flash of crystal clear insight that cuts through confusion. That's the wrathful deities in action. By recognizing these energies in daily life, you're preparing to recognize them in the intermediate states. Western psychology discovered something remarkable about this process. They found that when people consciously engage with these archetypal energies in life, through meditation, active imagination, or creative expression, they become more integrated, more whole. The same practices that prepare you for death actually make you more fully alive. Here's how to begin working with these teachings right now. Start by becoming aware of transitions in your daily life. Every time you move from one activity to another, every time your emotional state shifts, pause for a moment. Notice the space between the old and the new. This space, this gap, is a miniature intermediate state, a chance to practice remaining aware during change. The texts offer another powerful practice called Antara Bhava Yoga, taking the intermediate states as the path. It starts with morning awareness. When you first wake up before getting out of bed, recognize that you've just returned from a journey similar to the death process. Take a moment to remember. Consciousness continues even when ordinary perception stops. This simple recognition, repeated daily, builds confidence in the continuity of awareness. But here's where these practices become truly revolutionary. As you become more familiar with these transitions in life, something extraordinary begins to happen. Fear of death starts to dissolve, not through spiritual bypassing or denial, but through direct experience of consciousness's continuous nature. You begin to recognize that awareness itself never dies, it only transforms. The ancient masters left us these teachings because they understood something crucial. The way we live shapes the way we die, and the way we die shapes the way we live again. Every moment of awareness is creating patterns that will either bind us or free us. This isn't about believing in an afterlife. It's about working skillfully with consciousness itself. As we approach the end of our exploration, I want to offer you something powerful, a daily practice that brings together everything we've learned, because what comes next could transform not just your understanding of death, but your entire experience of being alive. As we reach the end of our journey through the Vedantic Death Scriptures, take a moment to consider something profound. Every breath you've taken while watching this video has brought you closer to that ultimate moment of transition. But here's the extraordinary truth. That's not something to fear. Instead, it's an invitation to live with greater awareness, deeper purpose, and profound understanding of who you really are. We've discovered that death isn't the end of consciousness, but a transition into new states of awareness. We've learned that the primordial light of pure consciousness shines not just at death, but in every moment of our lives. We've seen how modern science is beginning to validate what these ancient masters knew, that consciousness is far more vast and mysterious than we once believed. Think back to where we started, with those ancient manuscripts preserved through millennia of upheaval. What seemed like exotic religious texts have revealed themselves as something far more universal, a precise map of consciousness itself, a guide not just for dying but for living with complete awareness. These teachings aren't just theory, they're a direct path to transforming your daily experience of being alive. The Vedantic Death Scriptures challenge us to ask the most fundamental questions. Who are you beyond your thoughts and emotions? What continues when everything familiar falls away? These aren't just philosophical puzzles. They're practical questions that can transform how you experience every moment of your life. In our modern world, where anxiety about death and uncertainty seems to be at an all-time high, these teachings are more relevant than ever. They show us that by facing our mortality directly, by understanding the nature of consciousness itself, we can live with a freedom and peace that no external circumstance can disturb. But knowing about these teachings isn't enough. The ancient masters were clear. This wisdom must be practiced, experienced, integrated into your daily life. Every moment of awareness is precious. Every act of kindness creates patterns that will shape your journey through the intermediate states. Every instant of clarity is a glimpse of the same primordial light that appears at death. Here's what I invite you to do right now. Start with the simple practice we discussed. Tonight, as you're falling asleep, maintain gentle awareness of the transition. Notice how your consciousness shifts, how thoughts dissolve. This isn't just a meditation exercise. It's your first step in preparing for the most important journey you'll ever take. Share your experiences in the comments below. What insights from these teachings resonate most deeply with you? How has your understanding of death and life shifted after learning these ancient secrets? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to begin their own journey of discovery. And if you found this exploration valuable, You won't want to miss our next video, where we'll dive deep into the hidden practices of the Yoga Nidra tradition, ancient techniques for maintaining awareness, not just during death, but during dreams and every other state of consciousness. Remember, the Vedantic Death Scriptures aren't just about preparing for death. They're about waking up to the extraordinary reality of who you truly are. Every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of awareness is an opportunity to recognize the primordial light of consciousness that never dies. So I ask you, are you ready to begin this journey? Are you ready to transform your understanding, not just of death, but of life itself? The wisdom of the ages is calling. The only question is, will you answer? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next exploration into these ancient mysteries. If this video touched something deep within you, share it with someone who needs to hear this wisdom. Together, we're uncovering truths that have the power to transform not just individual lives, but human consciousness itself. Until next time, remember, every moment contains the seeds of enlightenment. Stay curious, stay aware, and keep exploring the deepest mysteries of existence.